We begin our story walk at the village church, St Leonard's, originally built in the 12th century and added to over many centuries. Angela Gray was our guide and showed us the rare carving of St Margaret defeating a dragon by bursting out of its middle with her cross. The 12th century stone font with the date of 1720 carved into its wooden lid. And panelling from a ship of the Armada fleet. More about that later. There are many beautiful stained glass windows, one of which was made by the famous architect and designer Frederick Preedy, who was born in nearby Offenham in 1820. The Millennium Window was made to celebrate the different aspects, groups and organisations of village life. The surrounds were coloured to match the original glass above.
When I came into the village, it was a manorial village. The squire owned everything. Everything belonged to the squire, and you still had to doff your cap, and you had to do all the right things, you know.
The name Bretforton has its origins in Saxon times and means the farmstead by the ford with the planks. The ford has gone and new planks now cross the brook. Crossing another bridge, we enter the meadow next to Top Farm. In this area there is a spring known as Spot Loggin's Well. There's a legend that if you went around it 3 times, you would lose anything you're carrying. But it was never actually a well. There is mention of a ghost of the same name. Loggin comes from the family who once lived at Top Farm, and the spot comes from spotted. The ghost is said to be a lady who can be spotted here at certain times, though when those times are is not stated in the source. The well, like the ice cream named after it, are now gone. Through the gap in the hedge and onto Western Road, we come to Collingwood or James's garage.
I came into the village a long time ago, and that was it right at the end of the war. I went away, lived in the next village, did my national service, one of the last ones to do national service, and then came back. And this village at that point was really taking off because market gardening was the in thing, and the people that lived in the village, you know, I mean, basically they lived in the squire's homes. 1983, the squire died. Now, he'd always operated a peppercorn rent for all the village, and when the houses were revalued, that meant they hadn't got enough money to generate to pay the death duties. So lots of things were sold off. I was able to buy this and a piece of land next door, and I traded as the garage, the village garage, which is almost like the village barber shop, because you get all the gossip all the time. Before fire and rescue, the garage was the first port of call. The policeman in the garage, and each village had a policeman, individual. Charlie Baker was ours, but Charlie, big friend of mine, we used to play football and cricket together. Charlie was in the police force from this village, I think 23 or 25 years, never put his best uniform on once.
I played so much darts with Charlie Baker, but he was a bad sport. And sometimes if he used to lose at darts, we used to play across at the Legion, and he would go home, put his uniform on and book everybody for not having their lights on outside the club in the cars. You know, he was a lovely, lovely bloke. As young kids, there was obviously fruit and vegetables. We used to go pinching apples, you know, little kids. And I can remember this one day that he was chasing us. It was really wet, and you were frightened to death. If Charlie knew who you were, and he went and told your dad, then you'd have a cuff aside the ear off your dad. Is up besides the copper as well. Anyway, this one particular day he was chasing us, and he got his shoes really muddied up, and he didn't catch us. But anyway, tap on the door at night. Looks up, Charlie the copper. I thought, oh my God, I'm in trouble here. Anyway, he says, I didn't know what had gone on, and my dad came back in and he says to me, he says, you've got to go up to the police station tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. And I'm thinking, I'm in trouble here then, you know, for some reason. So I go up there and I said, what's it, you know, sorry, Mr. Baker, all this, sorry, sir. He says, you made me run across them fields. He said, have you seen my shoes? He said, no, get and clean my bloody shoes. And that was it. That was my punishment, was to go and clean his shoes.
Mr. Kevin Riley, the head of Bretforton Village School, says that he loves teaching here and it's been the best part of his career. He asked the pupils to contribute to the project by either writing down or recording their memories of Bretforton. They remember camping trips, snowy days, Christmas time, Halloween, bell ringing and steam trains.
When it was Halloween, I dropped the candy out the window because it was a virus. And do the nativity in the church, so we had to do it at school. We had to do it at school because it was locked down. We filmed it on the playground, but the lorries kept passing by. I love going to the Fleece for my dinner. And I love the puddings and I love roast dinner. And I love when we go as a group in school together. Especially when it's Christmas, I love it. The whole school goes to Christmas dinner and there's tinsel around the roof, on outside and inside around, like on the walls at the top, like an oval. I enjoy the reacting show because it's so fun and there's lots of games, and me and Jack were so close to winning, but one other person wins because he's so fast. And when I go to the park, I always see that person who wins the show, and I always fall down off the monkey bars, and it's super funny. I went to Bretforton Park and I meet my friends and I play with them and I play football with them. And I play on the zip wire and the swings and the slide.
Christmas Day, first day in the house, 2005. Because we've got a bigger house, we can invite all the family. Everybody's down, 12 people. 10 o'clock, outside our front door, Silver Band are playing carols. Well, it's kind of gone up a few notches since then. So now we actually take food out, and there's 200 or 300 people gather on Christmas Day, and they go and play at the manor for the squire.
Well, the Silver Band was formed somewhere between 1894 and 1895. But the first time the band played was on top of that church tower. Right on top, yeah, right on top, in 1897, which was Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. But they had to haul the big bass drum up the side of the church on a rope to get it to the top. And then they played a big fanfare from the top for Queen Victoria. And we've done it since. Yeah, we did it for our Queen's Gold Jubilee and things like that. So.
Did it for the Silver Jubilee?
Yeah, yeah.
Golden Jubilee?
Yeah,
Did we do it for the diamond? Jubilee?
I'm not sure if we did. But it was
we
that's
did.
the first time they did any playing. And they were then known as Bretforton Temperance Band. Okay, no drink.
Which didn't last long.
But if they got caught drinking, it was quite a hefty fine. You had a few pence, which was a lot of money then. And
It's a few points, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. So they did what every right bandsman would do. They changed their name to Bretforton Silver Band,
Bretforton Brass.
Bretforton Brass Band. And then they carried on playing. In those days, they used to play to people dancing and things like that and everything. And the first picture we've got of the band is 1905, which is outside the manor, right in the front door where the manor of the bands are. But then I think about 1930 was it? They changed to Bretforton Silver Band,
Yes.
and it's called Bretforton Silver Band. Lots of people think it's because they've got silver instruments, and we have got some silver instruments in the band, but it's not that. They reckon why it was called Bretforton Silver Band is because they used to collect money, and they didn't want brass money; they wanted silver money in the collection. So so to keep the band going. We've been twinned since 1981. We've almost got like an unofficial twinning with a band in Germany. And we go across there every 4 years, and they come out here in between, so we see each other every 2 years sort of thing. Well, the first time we ever went to Germany with the band, 1981, some of the people had never left Bretforton, let alone gone abroad. So we went over there and we went on a coach, and we got there and we were arranged to meet our fellow hosts at their local sort of big bus stop, where all their local buses stopped. And so we all piled off the bus and started shaking hands with all these Germans. And they were just waiting for a bus. They were nothing to do with it. We've been asked to take 2 pigeons on the bus and let them go at Dover for this local pigeon fancier and see how long it took the pigeons to get back here. So we did. We took pigeons and let them go. And then we got to Germany, we told the Germans what we'd done. Except we got the wrong name for pigeon. And the translation we later found out was penguin. So these Germans were looking at us very puzzled when we said that we'd taken 2 penguins to Dover, let them go at Dover, and they found their way back all the way back to Bretforton. So there've been some right characters to get through the band over the years. There really has. I mean, one of the best players the band ever had, he's dead and gone now, was a man called Bill Ellison. He was a fantastic trumpet player, and he played with some of the top big bands and things like that in the country when he was alive. Then he went off to World War II, and he got blown up on a ship.
And survived.
And survived, but he lost his hand, which is his playing hand, of course. So he came back and learnt to play left-handed, changed instruments and learnt to play left-handed. Remarkable man, he was. Fantastic player.
Times change, but we try to keep the band rooted in some of its old traditions. We try to keep ex-members involved in things as they get older, and
Yeah.
that's everything, because it's important for people to remember the history of the band as well as what we do now.
Yeah.
Particularly as at one time everybody came from Bretforton, or the vast majority of people came from the village. Now that's not so much the case. People come from a bit further afield, so we try and educate them in the,
In the ways of Bretforton.
in the ways of Bretforton.
Yeah.
And some of them moved to Bretforton.
At the top of School Lane, we turn left onto New Street, past the Royal British Legion, the social club, and the shop.
We used to play a round robin in the village against the Fleece, the Legion Club across here, and the sports club, and we used to play darts and dominoes and pool, and and have a round robin, and then play for a little cup, a little trophy. But it always begged. I don't know whatever happened to all these trophies, because there were some wonderful trophies they played for. Seriously, I mean, I can remember playing darts, and we won what was called the Rose Bowl. And we were going to bring it back to the Legion Club here, which was going to be played for it over at Badsey. and they wouldn't let us take it unless it was insured for over £1,000. And this was back in the 60s and the 70s, you know. So they were wonderful cups, and I just wondered whatever happened to all these trophies.
Station Road. There used to be a station at the end of it. The station's gone, but the railway still runs.
My father worked on the railway, and as a little guy, as a little chap, I can remember when I was about 10 years old, the railway lines went along the top end of the village, and there was a guy on there called Norman Porter who was an engine driver, and they used to bring guys down from Morton-in-the-Marsh to work down in Evesham on the railway lines, you know, doing the lines. And I can remember one day that I waited for him and he picked me up, and I went in this, which, you know, wouldn't happen today, of course, and I went into this steam engine with him to take these guys back to Morton-in-the-Marsh, where they should turn round and come back, and then he dropped me off and I came home.
Up to the sports ground, home of Bretforton Cricket Club and many other teams.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been involved with the sport club since it more or less took off, and we had some really good teams here over the years, going back a long, long time when football used to be a big thing. Villages, Bretforton playing against Badsey and Littleton and Offenham, everybody had a football team.
Have you ever played for the cricket club?
Oh yes, I mean I played cricket. I'm still doing the cricket pitch, hence for being like this. I still do the wicket down there, still mow the recreation ground, and all for nothing, of course, is my contribution to the village.
Yeah.
Hey.
So which do you prefer, bowling or batting? Or fielding?
I was a little bit of both, but I mean I did enjoy the fielding because that was the more intense. You was, you know, got your finger on the game all the time. You had to be involved all the time.
Heading down Caldecott's Lane, back towards the centre of the village. Along Main Street, which was once the location of Gordon Moss's garage, now Ashwins Court.
Gordon Moss Motors was the garage down the village, which is now the 12 estate, opposite the pub, opposite the thing. There is some nice houses, and we had Colt, which came from Cheltenham, Colt cars, and I suppose it's 50 years back, you see, and Gordon, in his wisdom, was selling Colts, Saboros and things of quite expensive cars, and he was the first man in this area to actually advertise on television. Now, this is a village garage.
Wow.
and can you imagine? Have advert on ITV, ATV or whatever it was. And he used to put flights on, balloon flights and things like that, down on the Crown Meadow to attract the people in to come and buy these cars.
Sue Stokes and her husband bought their 17th century cottage in 2002. While refurbishing it, they discovered a cruck beam that gave parts of the building a much earlier date.
A cruck beam is when you take a big old oak tree, you cut it down the middle, and you put the two halves, which you fix at the top with another piece of wood and some wooden pegs, and it makes a lovely framework. And they said, you've got a cruck beam there, you have got to get that dated. And we had this man who was a dendrochronologist, and they come and they take a little core out of the beam, polish it up and compare it with existing records. And he came back and said that dates back to 1315 to 16, which made us go, oh, you know. He said, and because it's oak, it has to be erected when it's green oak, because it gets too hard, otherwise you can't do anything with it. So we reckon that was erected in that date. I think the houses that are around us were probably built in the 17th century, and they look like they've used, some of them have used parts of the old abbey that have been, you know, the old abbey was pulled down. If you look at the back of our buildings, you can see that some of the stones are half red and half white. That means they've been in a fire. But it's not like a wall is red, it's some of the stones are red. They've been taken from somewhere else. And some of them have got architrave, which I think you call it architrave. What do you call it round? The mullions around the windows, which are obviously not from the period that it was. They've been taken from somewhere else. You know, so there's lots of bits of Evesham Abbey which have been purloined, used, bought, you know, whatever, and I've been used in some of these old buildings.
Turning back onto Main Street, we come to the Memorial Hall, where those lost in the 2 World Wars are remembered.
But a guy, a lovely chap called Des Fowles, and he's not long passed away. He lived in the same cottage all his life, and he was 91, I believe. And he always told me the story of my granddad, who my granddad was in the First World War, and unfortunately he had mustard gas poisoning. I never ever knew him. And he told me the story that when he passed away, he was one of the first, either the first or the second, to be buried up in the cemetery, the new cemetery. And he said he was at school, Des Fowles, over at the Bretforton Primary School across here, and all the kids had to come out of the class, stand in a line along the side of the road, and when the coffin went past, they said, take their hats off and bow their heads.
Well, you had a fire in the village, and 3 ladies that lived in them, they were obviously homeless. And the local girls from the British Legion were stood outside with a tin, rattling the tin. Let's do something for the people. You know, it's on fire. The locals were in there. Because it's thatch and it burns slowly, they were able to go in the house and get lots of things. Somewhere I've got lots of photographs of people with tin baths carrying the goods and their belongings out. We formed a committee in the village, and I'll save that letter, which was written to the secretary, because in those days you would think a few pound meant a lot of money. That's a minute book, which we had to keep.
Back towards the centre of the village, we pass Bretforton Hall, also known as the White House.
A long time ago, my mother and aunt worked in a house. That's the White House, as I know it.
The one with the turrets.
The one with the turrets,
Yeah.
yes. And they always said, watch out for the White Lady, because she used to be on the stairs.
Okay.
But they never actually saw her, but they always did say that the White Lady resigned at the White House with the turrets.
And did they know anybody who said that they had ever seen her?
Well, the
Just a
owners,
rumour.
I don't know who they were, said that they had seen her, yes. But my mum or aunt,
They never did.
saw her, or had any feelings.
And nobody knew who she might be. There was no.
Well, apparently they thought that she was someone who lived there years ago. It was a young girl, apparently.
As we heard before, there are reports of other ghostly sightings in the village. Nikki Grimes reported that she and her friends had once seen an old woman walk across the graveyard, go behind a tree, and not come out again. A funeral coach and horses is said to drive along what was the old road in front of the manor. And Angela Gray told us of a lady she knew who wouldn't walk that way after dark due to the ghosts of Roman soldiers. So now to the manor itself.
Yes, so we only moved here about 3 years ago. So, but the house that we own goes back to like the 1570s. So there was a family called the Ashwins. So as you see in the church, there's 400 years of them. One of them had supported Elizabeth I. She was so grateful, so she gave them money and actually a captured Armada ship, which we have, we think it's Spanish, it could be Portuguese, there's obviously no records. So it was taken apart, and actually a lot of the wood is in our hallway, and some of it's in the church as well. Actually, there's a lot of tragedy with the Ashwins. It was like there was a curse. There were 3 sons that were meant to inherit, and you'll see in the church, the eldest son died at prep school with appendicitis, so there's a plaque towards him. So he was, I think, about 13. And then the second son, who was meant to inherit, he got really drunk in Hyde Park and walked in front of a car. So that was then it. And then the final one was left, and that was the last Ashwin, really. So he didn't have any children. I think he died in the 1970s. So it was like a curse. And that was stocked 400 years of Ashwins. So there used to be Tudor stocks in the centre of the village, but I think they turned it into a car park or something happened. So they asked to move the stocks to our land. So we had this old stocks. Yes, it's bizarre. So we have the old stocks. We have the old jail, which was next to the church. Only a little bit left of that. So obviously the Tudor barn, because the Ashwins were way ahead of it all. So they got into industrial cider making way back. So it's very interesting. We have a priest hole, because obviously it was Elizabethan and Jacobean. So there was a lot of political unrest. So there's a Catholic priest hole. And we have a dovecote, because way back, actually they used dove for the poo. Like we're about to get alpacas, aren't we?
Yes.
So we're about to get alpacas. So it's the poo was important, really. So that's me, really.
So I actually came here as an early sort of convert to the campaign for real ale. That must have been like 1974. So I came to the Fleece because it was one of the most authentic traditional British pubs you could possibly find, where beer was served from gravity and everything was unspoilt. And we came here as sort of, we weren't quite students, but we were about a year out of uni, and we all came here in a group. And, you know, we've actually got a jug at home that was sort of like a 1950s milk jug. It's a souvenir from Worcestershire. It's got Worcestershire pubs on it, and one of them is the Fleece. So it's kind of always, I think, been a bit of a destination sort of pub.
Yeah, so the Fleece was in the same hands from 1400 until 1977 in the same family, and there's a lady called Lola Taplin who was the last of the family line who gave it to the National Trust, because she didn't have any children and she didn't have any relatives, so she gave it to the National Trust. And so people say that the Fleece is haunted by the ghost of Lola. Speaking to her long-time friend Peggy Wheatley over a glass of champagne at 10 in the morning, when we were researching our little book, she told us that Lola decided she was going to come back as an owl and sit on top of the barn and keep an eye on the place. And to this day there's been a straw owl up there keeping an eye on things. And I remember this guy coming in one day, come around the corner, and he said, is that a fox or an owl? And I said, it's an owl. I said, it's an owl because Lola Taplin, she passed away. She said she was going to haunt the place as an owl. And so it's an owl. I said, oh, fair enough, I'll tell my missus. She says it's a fox. So I'm thinking, fair enough. The next minute, she walks around the corner. She says, are you the landlord? I said, yeah. She says, is that a fox or an owl? I said, it's a fox. Lola's shoes are in the settle, in the back of the settle in the brew house. And I've always been quite conscious of not wanting to disturb ghosts. I'll never allow anybody to come and have a ghost night or anything like that. I just don't, I think if they're leaving me alone, I'll leave them alone, really. And so one day, one of my ill-advised members of staff decided to get the shoes out to show somebody, and within 30 seconds a saucer had flown off the top of the coffee machine. It didn't just drop down, it flew and hit the other side of the bar and broke. So I think she's definitely about keeping an eye on us, really. Yeah, the witches' circles, they're painted on the floor, and apparently they go back to medieval times. And the idea is that the evil spirits come down the chimney and get mesmerised, which is in the same way that my son gets mesmerised by his girlfriend. They get mesmerised in a circle and get stuck in the circle, so keeping them away from the house and keeping the place benign. So, and then there are some other marks on the floor, which again are to stop the evil spirits coming through the cracks in the floor. So, but not on all the cracks, strangely enough. I don't know why. No idea. It looks like a kind of an animal in the pewtery. And we play it, we do that. They sit and we do. First time I repainted it all, I got my friend who's a druid to come and do a pagan blessing as well, which was quite nice. But it was shortly after that the pub burnt down, so I don't know if that's anything to do with it. One of my staff had gone to open the chickens up, came back up and saw smoke rising from the corner of the thatch at the back of the pub. So I called the fire brigade, and then I stood there on a ladder trying to put it out with a hose pipe, which didn't really work. And we basically got all the stuff out of the pub while the place was setting on fire and getting worse. We just got everything out. And then all the villagers turned up, and they formed like a human chain. And we got everything out and put it over in the barn. I had to basically negotiate with the fire chief to let me carry on to get everything out. And we got everything out, all the antiques, all the artefacts, apart from the big heavy stone cheese press, which we weren't able to get out. But basically we lost 1 or 2 pots through that. It was amazing, really. The support from the village was outstanding.
Thankfully, the Fleece was completely restored by the National Trust and has become very well known for folk music and Morris dancing.
Pebworth Morris have been here since they formed, really, in the late 70s. And I came along. I'd always fancied the idea of Morris dancing, and when I got here, I had no choice, really, but to join them, so that was that. I'm the first, in all that time, I'm the first Morris dancing landlord they've had, so. And it's, we've had a good time. Yeah, we practice in the barn. Or pre-COVID at least, practicing the barn every Friday. Yeah, and we've got a particular style of Morris, which is the Vale of Evesham style, which is a specific thing, which is weirdly, it's like scruffy Cotswold or posh border, because we're halfway between the two, and that's exactly how we dance. Dance out here on a Easter Sunday, May Day morning. We start out in the field in Bretforton. And then end up going around the village, then end up here for breakfast. And it's kind of spiritual. Because of Pebworth Morris, it's become much more of a Morrissey place. And me being interested, it's more Morrissey and folky than it ever was. I mean, it really is. Frequently we get Morris sides here. Frequently we get folk music.
So we moved in, and it was the 1st of May, and it's about 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. And we've woken up, and there's this tinkling of bells. And Kate says, what was that? I have no idea. And you've got to remember, we had moved from South London with Heathrow jets crashing over our head every 2 minutes from 4:30, certainly at 5 in the morning, and had learned to sleep through them completely. But, here's this tinkling bells. We opened the windows. There's just a bunch of Morris dancers in the cross. We know we're in the country now. We know we've changed. What a contrast. And historically, they used to always dance at sunrise on May Day. They don't do it now outside our house, fortunately. They do it somewhere else. And they come back here for a pint at 8:30 and a breakfast. 2 days where it seems to be appropriate is May Day, and the other one is St George's Day. And we have the Asparagus Festival. Again, it seems churlish not to turn out and have a pint before going to work.
When you think about it, asparagus in those days was grown, and it was a 12-month crop. You had the land, you planted the asparagus, you tended it, and you didn't put anything else with it. That remained sacrosanct, And they used to go out and mould it up and make sure that everything was going good. But nowadays, asparagus now, whereas that you would put your roots in the ground and you would leave them there 2 or 3 years before you actually cut a bud, and then take the buds, and then eventually it would produce lots of asparagus,
It was market gardening, farming, and you worked in the trade in one way or another. I mean, I worked for a company called Little Tun and Badsy Growers, which used to pick up all the fruit and veg from around the villages in the Vale. And they used to have salesmen and sell it on down the West Country in London. And
one of the growers came in to me and he said, can I have a petrol account? And I said, yes. And he said to me, I'll pay you when the grass comes in. Now, I didn't know that it only come in once a year. But religiously, he would come and pay. The grass would come in. He'd have the crop. He'd pay me. And then he'd carry on taking his fuel to keep the land going. And I would get paid the next year.
Billy Bird. I said to him one day, I said, Billy, you lived in a village all your life? He said, not yet. So we went up and bought some asparagus. He's got a thing that says open most of the time. It says outside his grower's place, yeah. It was one of the last growers that are about, and he's nearly finished, so it's all a bit sad. And when I first came, there were lots of the hovels or sheds around the village, all full in, where the fellas picked their, washed their onions or tied their asparagus or whatever they did. But Bill Bird, he ties the 100 of asparagus, which is the bundle of asparagus that gets auctioned at the asparagus auctions for, it'll make £500-700 and then get put back in and make another £300-400 for the silver band or for the church. But there's 120 spears in this thing. But yeah, he's your man for a tale or two, really. They used to make cider, and they used to go around each other's sheds and drink cider. But this particular fella, Des Fowles, we'd go and drink in his wash house, drink his cider, and you'd drink couple of pints, and then you'd stand up and your legs had gone completely. I've never laughed so much in my life. But he used to stand outside his front door on the main street at about 11 o'clock every morning looking for customers, as things, because they'd all gone, really. There was only him and a couple left, but yeah, a lot of them are gone, which is really sad that heritage is disappearing, I think. It's all but gone now. So anything we can do to preserve that, I think, would be good.